I think the first step is to have a good GMAT score. Once that, and especially with someone with more than 5 years of experience, right, there is a gap between the last time you've taken an exam and now. So I think getting into that routine of sort of studying for GMAT is important. Apart from that, when it comes specifically to my application, I think I focused on highlighting, right? So I spoke about my love for supply chain. I spoke about my love for manufacturing. I then also ensured that I brought out that risk-taking element where I left a comfortable job, joined an early-stage startup, failed at that startup, and used that as a stepping stone to go to my MBA. Many of the examples that I put out in my first draft never actually made it to the final essay, and it's a result of this question. And I'm sure that the final essays, both in terms of content, in terms of messaging, were much better than my initial drafts. 400 words is the word limit for the first two essays, and 250 words is the word limit of the third essay. And these seem like a lot, but when you start writing it, you realize how less it is, right? So my interview, given the fact that I had 7 years of experience, was primarily focused on my work ethics, right? So they wanted to check whether I had a good understanding of organizational structure, right? How is an organization structured? How do various functions report into each other? What's the hierarchy on the factory floor? In fact, when they asked me what are my post-MBA goals, and I told them semiconductor manufacturing, the first retort from them was, but there's no company that comes to ISB.
Right.
And my response, the first thing is, I would say is that yes, you should be aware of the fact that you have more experience than the batch, but don't let that become a limiting factor.
So let me start by congratulating you again, Ashwin, for cracking the prestigious PGP program of ISB.
Thank you.
Heartily congratulations. So let's start by understanding your academic and professional profile, Ashwin.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with my academics. So I've studied in Bangalore. I did both my 10th and 12th from a school in Bangalore. In 10th, the year I passed out, there was a CGPA that was awarded instead of the marks. So I got a 10 on 10 CGPA in my 10th. And in 12th, I had a 94.8% in my boards. I then did engineering from, again, a college in Bangalore, from a pretty reputed college in Bangalore. I did my engineering in industrial engineering and management. And I ended up graduating with a CGPA of 9.19 out of 10. Post-engineering from campus, I worked with one of the leading medical device manufacturers in the country. I worked with them for about 6 years, and I primarily did roles in supply chain management and manufacturing. My last role before I left the company was as a production team leader, where I was leading a team of 65 unionized operators who were in charge of building X-ray tubes. So it was more on the supply chain management, production planning, equipment maintenance side of things. Post my time with this company, I then joined a very early stage startup as the head of operations. We were into making smart furniture solutions exclusively for consumption by the US clientele. Unfortunately, within about 8 to 10 months, we quickly realized that we were going to run out of money. And in fact, we did run out of money, and we had to wind down operations after about 8 months. So with this, ever since the end of last year, I've been working with another medical device manufacturing company, headquartered in the US, but running operations out of India. And I work with them in the supplier development space. So just in summary, my career over the last 7 years has been mainly focused in supply chain manufacturing, with an additional focus on manufacturing and supplier development.
Okay, thank you. And Ashwin, I recollect from my discussion that you wanted to post your MBA, you wanted to work in the semiconductor manufacturing space. So, after having done engineering and specializing in industrial engineering and management, how are you planning to navigate your career interest in working in the semiconductor manufacturing space?
Yeah, so just a word on the semiconductor space itself, right? If you look at the average number of chips a person uses, it's become 5x over the last 20 years, right? So production and manufacturing of these chips have become very critical. And geopolitically, there are only two countries, that's China and Taiwan, that dominate the manufacturing of this. And given the recent happenings with COVID and the whole China plus one strategy, a lot of companies are looking to diversify into India and Southeast Asia, more importantly, in terms of manufacturing. So being an industrial engineer, I have a good background in supply chain management. And if an industry really has to take hold in a particular country, you need deep supply networks capable of producing the right product at the right cost at the right time. I think this is where I can add value as a professional. So not so much so in the technical space, that is designing the chip or coding the chip, but it's more in getting the products out of the factory into the customer's hands, where I think that I can add most amount of value. And the reason semiconductor particularly is, as I mentioned, right, there's a lot of strategic importance given to this industry right now. The government has come out with a lot of initiatives to increase exports. Companies are coming here. So yeah, so being an industrial engineer, I think supply chain is one of my strengths, and I think supply chain is something that's needed for the semiconductor industry to flourish in India, and hence, yeah.
Great. And as a engineering graduate, having worked for more than 7+ years in industries like manufacturing, logistics, and supply chain, what was your application strategy and primary focus area when you were making your application?
Yeah, so I think the first thing which is non-negotiable is to have a good GMAT score, right? I think whatever your academics were up until now, that includes your 10th, 12th, and undergrad, there is no control over it, right? It's done. So there's no point worrying or feeling happy about it. I think the first step is to have a good GMAT score. Once that, and especially with someone with more than 5 years of experience, right, there is a gap between the last time you've written an exam and now. So I think getting into that routine of sort of studying for GMAT is important. Apart from that, when it comes specifically to my application, I think I focused on highlighting my personal narrative in such a way that the only logical conclusion of this narrative was to do an MBA, right? So I spoke about my love for supply chain. I spoke about my love for manufacturing. I then also ensured that I brought out that risk-taking element where I left a comfortable job, joined an early-stage startup, failed at that startup, and used that as a stepping stone to go to my MBA. So I think for me, the key things about the ISB application is, of course, one is your GMAT score. The second is to have a good, compelling narrative that ends up with you doing an MBA, right? So that it's a no-brainer for whoever is sitting across that AdCom panel.
Great. And while you had thought of what content you would want in your application, and believe that's when you heard about ISBmantra and signed up with us for the application service. So you have had numerous discussion with the consultant. So how has these discussions and experience which came out, or the outcome which came out of these discussions, has helped you shape your thoughts and eventually convert them into a strong essay and an application form?
Yeah, I think it was, I would say the support was really great. In fact, what I just said in my previous answer, that building a narrative that ends up with you doing an MBA, actually came from the consultant himself. It's not my original thought. And I remember, this time ISB had changed the topics for the essay. So up until last year, I think it was the standard. And this year there were a couple of differences in the topics. And I think this year the essay topics really required you to really go into your experience and really bring out those characteristics. So I think where the ISBmantra mentor added value was in questioning, right? He would keep questioning me as to what exactly I did, right? So I would bring out in my essay that, we achieved X, Y, Z. But he would focus on really where I have moved the needle from X to Y, Y to Z. So whether it was just a team achievement or whether I have contributed something. In fact, many of the examples that I put out in my first draft never actually made it to the final essay, and it's a result of this question. And I'm sure that the final essays, both in terms of content, in terms of messaging, were much better than my initial drafts, which I had done with no help. Right. So I think that is one thing, which is in terms of the questioning, in terms of the clarifying really what it is that you want to put across the AdCom, which then helps to build a good personal narrative. And the second one is, 400 words is the word limit for the first two essays, and 250 words is the word limit of the third essay. And these seem like a lot, but when you start writing it, you realize how less it is, right? So these 400 words, etc., are real. The real prime real estate in terms of your essay. I think the mentor really helped in cutting out what was not needed and really focusing on what was there, what I needed to put across. So I think two things really where ISBmantra helped me. One is questioning what I had put in that essay, so that really what I had contributed to that particular incident came on. And second was editing the essay itself, right? Removing the extra amount of lines, whatever is not important. So I think, yeah, it was really helpful in terms of these two things. I'm sure that the three essays that I submitted would be very different if I had not gone this route.
Right. Thank you. Nice to hear that the whole service uh, fulfilled your expectations, in terms of a strong essay. How much time did ISB give you to prepare for your admissions interview?
Yeah, so this year, the shortlists, or rather the fact that you have been shortlisted was announced at once. So I think I remember it was in the last week of September where I got the shortlist, and then interviews were done city-wise. So in Bangalore, where I'm from, the interview was on probably around the 20th, 21st of October. So I had a month's time between the initial communication that I had got shortlisted and my actual interview date. And I think this 1 month is both good and bad, because, of course, it's good because you have time, and it's bad for the same reason as well, right? Because there's a tendency to overthink, and there's a tendency to sort of do things. But I think because I had a good help and a good direction in my application, the interview process became that much easier. So yeah.
Great. And how was your experience interviewing with ISB, and what were the key focus areas of discussion during your interview?
I think the experience was, if I were to summarize it in a word, I would say it was very professional, right? When the candidates are waiting, you're not just sent into a room. In fact, one of the alumni who takes your interview comes in, walks you to the room itself, makes you feel very comfortable. So there were a bunch of panels in the interview, probably greater than a number of 5 panels, and each of these panels consisted of 3 alumni. So I had 3 alum who were taking my interview. And my interview, given the fact that I had 7 years of experience, was primarily focused on my work ex, right? So they wanted to check whether I had a good understanding of organizational structure, right? How is an organization structured? How do various functions report into each other? What's the hierarchy on the factory floor? Then there were questions on leadership, right? So I had mentioned a couple of my strengths in the essays as leadership.
Right.
So in fact, they picked out the same instances from the essays and dug really deep into it, which is where I felt that the sessions with the mentor helped, because it was a similar degree of questioning that I'd gone through them. So I was fairly confident in terms of answering that. And the third area where the focus was on in terms of my extracurriculars. So I have done theater, I have done embedded music throughout my life. So there were a few questions on that, not too deep. And the last one was of course, in terms of clarity on what are your post-MBA goals. So, and here is where they really test you, whether you're saying something just for the sake of it, whether you really believe in it. In fact, when they asked me what are my post-MBA goals, and I told them semiconductor manufacturing, the first retort from them was, but there's no company that comes to ISB.
Right.
And my response was not to get flustered. I said, I understand, companies are coming now, which means it takes 36 months for them to build a factory and, start hiring and things. So I know that there is a gestation period. So this is my real long-term goal. My immediate goal is to stay in supply chain, but my long-term goal is to contribute to semiconductor manufacturing. So I think whatever your goal is, whatever is there in your essay, you have to be extremely thorough in it. And I think, a lot of questioning yourself helps out because what the interview panel will ultimately see is, are you able to back up what you've written? And I think that's what it is. So my interview process was pretty professional. They focused on a couple of main things. They focused on my work ex, my understanding of organization structure, a bit of my extracurriculars, and clarity on my post-MBA goals. Interview lasted for about 30-40 minutes, but to me, it felt like it was about 5 minutes because, you don't think about it. So, yeah.
So one more question just around the interview. In the last, the panel asked you a question that, do you have any questions you wanted to ask to the panel? So did you ask a question to them?
Unfortunately, I didn't. So in hindsight, I should have. I think that's a good opportunity to show them what you are thinking, how serious you are about the school, what sort of research you've done about the school. And I think it's important that candidates be prepared with this. Not just for ISB. I think a lot of schools ask this question, and it gives you a chance to show them how serious you are about interviewing it. Towards the end of my interview, there was a lot of rapid questioning and answering. So I think just to sort of cool it down, I said, no, I don't have any questions at the end.
Okay.
So yeah,
All right.
but my advice to prospective candidates is that there will be questions in your mind. There will be questions. If you do your research about the school, if you do your research about your clarity goals, about your goal clarity post MBA, there will be questions, and you should ask it. I think the alumni are very friendly and warm, and yeah.
Right. But Ashwin, it helps bust one myth that one definitely should ask a question. If you don't ask a question, it's like doing a crime, and you might not get an admit. So at least that it's not a compulsion. But as you rightly pointed, a well-researched students asking a question does go well.
Exactly. It's a double-edged sword, right? If your question is something that's not authentic, the interview panel would immediately get to know, and that would serve as a negative on your applications.
Absolutely. So Ashwin, now that you have an admit, are there any specific things you are planning to do before you join ISB?
Nothing really specific, but a couple of things would be, one is to connect with a couple of my future batchmates, right? So ISB themselves organize these professional networking sort of meets, I think before the academic year starts. So one is to, of course, connect with my candidates. And, another thing about why ISB, when you would ask me earlier, is the diversity, right? I mean, it's just mind-boggling, So far, I've been in an environment where there are only engineers. And, suddenly I can see that, there are CAs, there's a physiotherapist, there are many people who have joined this batch. So I think one is to connect with a lot of these people and to really see where they come from. And I think the second one that I'd like to do is, just get into that routine of a bit of, academic work, sort of reading online or taking some free courses, so that it's not too big a transition when I finish my 7 years of experience and then get back to, academics again. So yeah, these two things, nothing too much.
Great, excellent. Ashwin, before we wrap up, what is your advice to prospective applicants, especially who are coming with higher work experience? So when I say higher work experience, I mean to say more than the average work experience.
Well, the first thing is, I would say is that, yes, you should be aware of the fact that you have more experience than the batch, but don't let that become a limiting factor. Figure out a way to use that to your advantage, right? If you have more experience, like if you have 6 or 7 or even 8 or 8+ years of experience, you will have a lot of stories to tell professionally, right? You would have seen a lot of cycles, you would have seen a lot of, team politics, intra-corporate, how rules work, etc. You should bring that to the fore. You should use that as a strength. So I think the first thing I would say is, remove this fact that you have more experience as a negative. In fact, I started with that mindset, and it was my mentor. In fact, the mentor also had a similar amount of experience when he applied to ISB. So he helped me clear that misconception. So remove that from your mind. Number 2, focus on getting a good GMAT score. Like I said, right? It's been a while since academics has happened to any of us. So give yourself some time to get a good GMAT score. And the third one is, again, build a good narrative that ends up with you wanting to do an MBA. That's logical, right? It doesn't seem too drastic that typically if you have more than 7 years experience and you're doing an MBA, it could be out of desperation, and the AdCom can sense that immediately. The interview panel can sense that immediately. So make sure that, when you're doing it and when you're presenting it, you're saying the right reasons for doing it. So yeah. So biggest advice I would say is remove the fact that you think that you have a lot of experience. It can work to your advantage if you want it to. Definitely.
Yeah. Rightly said, Ashwin. If presented well, the length and breadth of the experience,
there's nothing like it.
Take go into your advantage. Thank you so much again, Ashwin, for doing this, and I leave you with a lot of best of luck for this 52-week roller coaster ride you will get into. And I think this is the only time you will have to spend for yourself, which is some perhaps holidays, sleep, and some rest. Because once your program starts, that becomes a luxury.
Thanks, Vikram. All the best to you.
All the best. Thank you so much.